to the History Slam podcast from ActiveHistory.ca. Here's your host, Sean Graham.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome to the History Slam, everybody. I am Sean Graham, coming at you today nearly live. We are in Ottawa, Ontario, where the kids are back at school and school buses are out. Kids walking down the street with giant backpacks filled with books and lunches and all that fun stuff. And one of the things a lot of students will have the opportunity to do this year is a new contest by the Historica Foundation. It's a Heritage Minute contest, which I think we all remember the Heritage Minutes. And now they are soliciting submissions from students across the country about Sir John A. Macdonald and the Fathers in Confederation, a new contest. And here to talk to us about that contest is Bronwyn Graves, the Education Manager at Historica Canada. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We should note that Bronwyn is in Toronto at the moment. I am in Ottawa, so we are doing this over Skype. So if there is any sort of slight delay in the audio, that is the reason for that. Before we get into the contest particularly, as the Education Manager for Historica Canada, exactly what is it that you are responsible for?
Well, I work on a wide variety of programs here. Programs that create student contests or learning tools or any sort of educational component. I will work with the various program staff to ensure that it's a good fit for whatever the curriculum is and that pedagogically we're sort of hitting the right notes in terms of our goals regarding student engagement and critical thinking.
And some of the other projects that you've worked on have been Aboriginal Arts and Stories, the War of 1812, Sir John A. Day, and the Diamond Jubilee. In that sense, though, I mean, you're part of a national organization, and when you're talking about hitting curriculum goals, those are very specific to each province. So how do you navigate those waters of being this national group, having to deal with the various curriculums across the country?
It's very challenging, and we don't in the learning tools try to create something that is going to meet every single curriculum goal in every single province or territory, because that would be impossible. When you look at a given subject like Confederation, it can be taught at different points in different grades within a province. In Ontario, it's introduced in middle school, but then again revisited in grade 12. And in other provinces, you'll see it introduced as early as grade 5. So what we do is generally try and approach our content from a thematic perspective and also use the historical thinking concepts developed by Peter Satius out of UBC to ensure that the historical thinking skills and the critical thinking skills that are also a big part of the curricula are incorporated into whatever we're doing.
And is this through direct contact with teachers? I know you have a lot of stuff on the website about that are sources for teachers to come to, but do you have a lot of interaction with teachers in classrooms, or is it mostly dealing with teachers when students aren't there to provide them tools?
We have worked with a lot of teachers in the past to create the learning tools, and there is a section on our website where teachers can submit their learning tools to be uploaded to our site. Generally speaking, my background is in teaching, and the teaching consultants that we work with will still be their active classroom teachers with a lot of experience under their belt. So we rely on their expertise to try and also the feedback from any teachers that we receive to try and make sure that we're hitting the right notes.
And again, with that in mind, I mean, how do you find teachers to participate in this? Is it sort of anyone who teaches history, we're interested in talking to you and what your needs are? And there's this great diversity, too, in the sense of how people teach history. So, somebody might have a more book approach. Other people might be more interactive, group projects, that sort of stuff. I mean, how do you get teachers involved in this and ensure that you're getting a good cross-section of people?
Well, we rely very heavily on social media outreach. All of our programs are very active on social media, and so we reach out to teachers through, on Twitter, for example, using like Canadian history hashtags and EduChat hashtags to make sure that we are engaging with teachers in that way. Mm-hmm. We go to all the conferences. I shouldn't say all. We go to many conferences across the country in the fall. It's conference season for the various social science teachers associations. So we make sure we're reaching out there. We also do a lot of direct advertising in teacher magazines so that teachers are aware of what we have available. And in terms of the teaching styles, we try to create learning tools that will accommodate different teaching styles. So if you're interested in a lot of group activities, if you pick up one of our education guides, there will be something in there for you. But teachers who prefer more of an individualized approach, focused on more book learning, could, for example, use some activities that are related to the Canadian Encyclopedia online and are more of a reading analysis type activity.
Now, I think a lot of people who are listening to this might be surprised at hearing you talk about all these things that the Historica Foundation does, because I think a lot of people just think of the Historica Foundation as those people who create the Heritage Minutes and not much else. You mentioned some of the other things that the group does, the Canadian Encyclopedia, for example. But in your experience, have you found that people are surprised or don't expect that the foundation does all these other things?
That does occasionally happen. I feel like the Heritage Minutes are definitely our best known creation. But some of our other programs, the Memory Project, for example, as you mentioned, Aboriginal Arts and Stories, Passages Canada, they've all been going strong for many years. Those three programs in particular are all at or around the decade mark. And we'll have teachers who may recognize and be familiar with one of our programs, but don't necessarily know our other programs. So our website is a great sort of clearinghouse for all of the stuff that we offer. So anyone who goes to Historica Canada online can check out all the different bits and pieces that we have going.
Yeah, and there is really a lot there. When you go to the site, at the top of the site, there's a bunch of different things that you can click on and a bunch of different resources, including the contest is one which we'll talk about in a little bit. But generally speaking, what do you find is your audience for these things? I mean, you talk about marketing to teachers through social media and through other means, and obviously the Heritage Minutes on television, based on where they air, you can get a sense of who you're trying to reach. But in terms of a lot of this online stuff and the website, have you guys done research into figuring out what is the audience that's coming to the site? And do you know what sort of demographics you get?
It really varies program to program.
Okay.
So there are some resources that are very teacher-focused. For example, the learning tool page of our site, primarily teachers go there. The education guides that we create, they are classroom activities, basically. So we know that teachers are our primary target there and our primary audience. Other resources like the Canadian Encyclopedia, which is a free online bilingual encyclopedia, reach a more varied audience. So you'll get a lot of teachers who are using it as a classroom resource, but also a lot of students, high school and post-secondary, who are going to it for essays, because unlike Wikipedia, it's created by academics. And it's a permanent resource, so people can cite the entries on it and realize that they're using a source that their teachers will approve of. We also get a lot of general public, people who are just fans of Canadian history, looking to bone up on a particular subject, and they will go to the Canadian Encyclopedia or one of our other sites just out of their own interest.
And I find when I Google stuff, a lot of times the first thing that comes up after Wikipedia, I mean, if I'm Googling a Canadian issue, a lot of times the first thing that will come up after Wikipedia is the Canadian Encyclopedia. So, on those searches, I mean, you're certainly getting a lot of traffic from people who aren't necessarily seeking you out in that way too, which has to help.
I think a lot of students and a lot of the general public, they rely heavily on the internet for their quick go-to questions, but also more in-depth research. And the Canadian Encyclopedia is a really great resource in that regard, because it is a more reliable resource than something that is user-generated, because we go to experts to create each of the entries.
And in my experience, they're very well written and very digestible. So, with all due respect to my fellow academics, it doesn't seem like they're written by academics.
Well, that's our goal. We do have a really dedicated editorial team here who works very hard to, curate the entries. Not only in terms of diversity, we're meeting our goals, so we have a wide variety of entries on a wide variety of subjects, but that they are accessible, because we recognize a significant portion of our audience are high school students. So they need to be able to reach out to us and know there's something that they can use that's written at an appropriate level and tone for them.
And when you're looking at different subjects to cover, what is that process like? And not necessarily just with the encyclopedia. When you're looking at, say, the Heritage Minutes and other projects that you're going on, I mean, what is that process like when you're investigating what to look into and what to offer people? How do you come up with those decisions to make sure that you're providing content that people are going to want to find?
That process really varies across the board depending on the program. I know that we've done, I don't work on the Heritage Minutes directly, but I know that team has done research in terms of polling with Ipsos Reid to find out which Heritage Minutes Canadians most want to see made. In terms of the Canadian Encyclopedia, we look at curriculum for sure, what subjects are and what entries need to be created to correspond with what students need. Sometimes the content that we create can be also anchored to a commemoration or celebration just because funding is available and because there's public appetite for those materials around commemorations. A great example for that would be the War of 1812. We created a series of education guides because it is taught in schools, particularly in Ontario and Quebec. But around that commemoration, we took the time to, join in on the celebrations and the remembrance, create some new materials for teachers.
And you mentioned the Heritage Minutes, and let's get into this contest a little bit. The contest is the Stories of Sir John A. Macdonald, and you are inviting submissions of Heritage Minutes from students across the country. Now, before we talk about that a little bit, on the website, on your profile on the website, it says that your favorite Heritage Minute is the Halifax Explosion one. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording. And that's one, to me, that always kind of freaked me out because of that vignette at the end of the freeze frame of the guy. He's on the telegraph looking right at the camera. And I always, as a kid, it always freaked me out because it felt like he was looking right at me. So that one's your favorite. And why is that your favorite?
I think it is because of the impact at the end. I remember watching it on TV when I was a kid, and it really stuck out. I remember watching it and feeling like I hoped there was going to be this happy ending for poor Vince. So because of that, the big finish and the drama in that minute, I think that it stuck with me over the years. I do have other favorites. The new ones that we've created are excellent. I really like the Pierpoint Minute and the 1812 minute around Queenston Heights as well.
And they are really one of these things that stick out. I think you and I are of a similar age, generally speaking, and we talk about seeing them when we were growing up. And I mean, the one for me was always Burnt Toast and Laura Secord. Those were the two that always seemed to air on stuff I was watching, or maybe it's just the ones that really stood out to me. And it was interesting. In the fall last year, I taught a course on Canadian historiography, and one of the things I had my students do was do a presentation using Heritage Minutes, and they had to compare and contrast two Heritage Minutes, one old one, one that was made in the 90s, and one from the new batch. And it was really interesting to see the ones that they selected and how they analyzed the minutes in terms of what the intended audience was, the different stylistic choices. There was one about the soldier from Winnipeg, I believe, and his funeral. Someone picked that one, and how that one was presented as retrospective of his life at his funeral. And just seeing the way in which they analyzed those minutes was really interesting because, like myself and I think like you, they had this experience of growing up with the minutes, and now you're studying them from a different perspective. So it gives them a new life a little bit within the context of now the organization is making all these new ones. So the minutes really are a great entry point into history for a lot of folks. And is my experience. And is that sort of the feedback that you've gotten in your time at Historica?
Yep, absolutely. We hear back from a lot of people who are of our generation who have a great fondness for the minutes, watched them on TV growing up and are now really happy to see them coming back. I also hear from a lot of teachers who use them as sort of warm-ups in their classroom to try and broach a subject or get kids kind of more excited about a subject because they are short, they're engaging, they hint at a story, they don't tell the whole story just because they are only a minute. So it's a great jumping off point. We always say when we're talking about the minutes that they aren't meant to be comprehensive. It's only a minute. We have to cut. They're meant to be a conversation starter. And from the feedback I've heard, they're very successful as that.
Oh, definitely. And let's talk about this contest then in terms of starting a conversation. As I mentioned, it's the Stories of Sir John A. contest. So, I'll let you explain exactly what is the purpose and the goal of this contest.
Well, January 2015, as you know, was the anniversary of Sir John A.'s 200th birthday. And there was a lot in the newspapers. There was a lot created around his 200th. And a lot of it was very mixed in terms of there were strong voices who were advocating for remembering Sir John A.'s positive contributions, the father of Confederation, where would the country be without him, the formidable task he had in creating Confederation. But there's also obviously a lot of well-deserved negative press around some of Sir John A.'s actions and choices, particularly around his treatment of Aboriginal peoples at that time. We wanted to create an opportunity in terms of, this commemoration to give students some agency in terms of Sir John A. as a subject and Confederation as subjects that need to be taught, need to be explored, and would be nice to give students the chance to use their voices in terms of what stands out, what should be remembered, and how should we remember Sir John A. The video contest was a fairly obvious choice for us because, as I mentioned before, students are all natural filmmakers now. Everybody's got an iPhone, or almost everybody, and kids are always recording each other, making videos of what's going on in their lives. So it's very intuitive for them to, come up with something scripted, record it, and upload it to the internet. Kids are very tech savvy these days. So that was, I guess, the two disparate elements coming together, wanting to provide this opportunity for both commemoration, but also critical examination. What should we remember and why, and how to do it? Reach out to kids in a way that makes sense to them, using technology, allowing them to be creative, and allowing them to use their voices.
Yeah, you mentioned that kids, everyone records everything now. I remember as a kid, we had assignments where we would try and create a video, and you had to make sure somebody had a camera and then a tape, and good luck editing. I mean, you had to basically get it right on the first take or just sort of tape over that take. And it was such a ridiculous process that, a 5-minute video, to get a very poor quality 5-minute video, would take, 4 hours. And now it's so much easier that you can do it on your phone, you can do all the editing really easily and put it together. And some of the stuff, because some of the submissions are already online, some of them are pretty slick.
We always see a variety of entries when we do a video contest. There are some kids who really enjoy all of the editing, the polish, putting music to their submission, and that's great. That's absolutely something we encourage. But we also see some entries that are really quite minimalist, story-based, sort of a single shot with people acting out something, and their emphasis has been on like the acting in the script, and there's totally room for both, which I really appreciate. We've also had some entries that are really creative. When we think about Heritage Minutes here at Historica, I guess we have a certain framework in mind, the minutes as we've created them. And when we put out video contests like this, kids don't have those preconceptions, and they will put the formula totally out the window, which I really enjoy seeing because they're engaging with the subject matter in a way that is really unique to their lives and their experiences. So we've had some things that are really amusing, somewhat irreverent, and also just creative and engaging. Sir John A. or people doing raps, and I'm all for it. We really encourage that creativity in terms of approach because the kids are engaging in the subject matter, which is really the goal of the whole contest.
Yeah, and I would encourage anybody to go to the site and check out some of the ones that have been submitted because, there is a great diversity there. And what's cool about them is that you can tell that, even if they're not all that slick or if they are very minimalist, whatever it is, that there's energy behind them and that the people who are doing them seem to be having a good time and seem to be really interested in the subject, which frankly, is kind of the point, that you get interested in a historical topic. And let's be honest, anyone who has tried to teach history, really at any level, knows how difficult it can be to get people to be interested in it. So if this is a way that's going to get students engaged, then I'm all for it.
That's generally our mentality when we operate any student contest. It's always nice to have, the carrot. There's a prize at the end for a handful of students. Usually we try and give something like an iPad away that would be appealing to students. But also I think there is something engaging for them in giving them the freedom and the agency to, create something on a historical topic that is, their perspective, their voice, and in a medium that is fun and for them.
Now, I guess one of the questions or one of the backlash things that would come about a contest like this is that specifically with Sir John A. Macdonald, because not only did you mention that there are certain negative things that he did and his legacy isn't 100% positive, and that's certainly clear, but there are already historic or heritage minutes about Confederation, about Sir John A. Macdonald, and about Sir Georges Étienne Cartier. So why did you feel the need to do a contest 4 minutes on a subject where you've already done one, as opposed to maybe finding something that has been less covered, not only by Heritage Minutes, but just by historians in general? It strikes me that this could be an opportunity to go into something that students may not know that much about, as opposed to a relatively well-known figure. Just wondering what that process was like and why there was this sense to go with this Macdonald one.
Well, I think, as I mentioned before we started recording, when we choose a minute, when we tell a story in a minute, we have to leave a lot out. They are not comprehensive. They're far too short for that. They are conversation starters. So what we chose to focus on in a minute, and it requires tremendous amount of analysis and discussion around boardroom tables for us to come up with which minute to focus on. The Cartier one is an example where we couldn't come up with just 1 minute because he had so many notable accomplishments in his life. So you'll notice if you're a student of the minutes, or your students are, that one sort of deviates from our traditional formula because it looks at a series of accomplishments. But 1 minute is not enough to tell the stories around Confederation, to tell all of Sir John A.'s stories. So this contest provides an opportunity for students to look beyond the story that we have focused on in the minute that we've created, figure out what stories they think need to be told, which elements they think need to be remembered. And that is an opportunity for them to think critically about his legacy. And they can tell a story that is not a happy ending story. It doesn't have to be the Sir John A., father of Confederation story. There is room for critical analysis in here. And that is something that we encourage. The second part of your question, in terms of why put this out here to students on something that has already been covered, is partially because it's taught in schools. So Confederation and Sir John A. Teachers will be covering it in the classroom, and the contest is a great way for them to kind of make their lesson plans more fun. And that's something that we hear from teachers that they're always looking for.
Now, in your answer, you mentioned that the result doesn't necessarily have to be positive, which is interesting because that was my next question. A lot of the minutes, and one of the criticisms that I've heard about the minutes, when I was teaching the course, one of the questions I got when people asked, why are you using the minutes? You probably shouldn't, because they're all too positive. They all shine a positive light on Canada and give a skewed impression of this country's history because it's so positive. But what you said is that, if a student wants to talk about, say, Macdonald's policies towards Aboriginal peoples, that obviously doesn't shine a very good light on his life, that's okay too.
It's more than okay. I think the point of the contest is not to celebrate or create a video which is focused exclusively on Macdonald's positive accomplishments. It's to encourage kids to look at both his positive and negative accomplishments in his life and the implications for the years to come, to choose a moment and then to explore that. So absolutely, if we have entries that are focused on some of the more negative elements of his life and legacy, then that's something that we not only are okay with, but encourage actively. And in terms of the comment that the minutes all focus on positive aspects of Canadian history, while there are a great number that do, if you look through the collection, and I'm not the minutes scholar here at Historica, so I can't cite an exhaustive list of the examples where we look at darker chapters in Canadian history. We do, however, have some minutes that do focus on those. One of the minutes, Nitro, looks at Chinese railway workers, and another, Tommy Prince, for example, looks at the treatment of Aboriginal veterans following World War II. They do exist, but I think that maybe you have to go back, dig through the collection. There's a lot more there than people realize.
Right. Well, I guess the response to that, or at least in terms, because the one I was thinking about was the Chinese railroad workers one, but even that one, I feel as though that it puts a positive spin a little bit on the situation at the end, because he goes in with the material to for the explosion to set it, and then it explodes and everyone thinks he's dead, and he comes out sort of staggering, and everyone goes and cheers, and the guy smiles because he gets more money to send to his family. So even though that's the experience of a lot of Chinese workers was very negative and a lot of them died, in that minute itself, I think there is a perception that, well, for this guy it worked out, and then so there's this positive spin. I think that's the perception people have of the minutes in general. There certainly isn't one of I don't think there's one on conscription, say, and something very divisive that leads to a very negative perception of someone who doesn't know the material itself. But that being said, I think negative things in our history are good to acknowledge and good to have in a heritage minute. And in that sense, even a negative thing can be turned into a positive, because that's our story, and that's how this country got to where it is, through both positive and negative things. So by highlighting something negative, in a sense, it's a positive because you're talking about it, and that's something that's really important to do.
I think also, as I mentioned before, these minutes are not meant to be the comprehensive story of any moment or chapter of Canadian history. So when you look at something like the Chinese railway workers, if I was using that in a classroom, then I would use that as a warm-up at the beginning, or as a stepping stone for deeper analysis. And when you look at our most recent minutes, we've started creating learning tools to go with them. They also exist for some of the older minutes, and we leave it to the teachers to ask questions like that. These are a teaching tool in that regard. They are a stepping stone to bigger questions. Whose perspectives are not told here? What are some other possible outcomes here? What is the agenda, if any, you think is inherent in this minute? I have one other thing I want to add in, Sean.
Yeah.
We are currently filming 2 minutes this fall that are focused on Aboriginal perspectives, and one is on residential schools, which is obviously a very dark chapter in Canada's history, and the other is on the treaty process. So both of those are designed to kind of redress that balance and look at some darker chapters in Canadian history, and then make those available to the public as well.
And those would be really interesting to see once they come out, because they are also very topical, right? Particularly the residential school issue with the Truth and Reconciliation report. And those are the sorts of ones that I'm happy that the organization is looking into, because, yes, the Fathers of Confederation, very important in creating this country, but, residential schools, the Aboriginal experience, the same thing. And so that these things are being covered is terrific. I know a lot of people will be happy to hear that.
Well, I think that the minutes and all of our content is changing over the years. When we look at the first minutes, they were created. We talk about the ones that we watched when we were kids. The approach to Canadian history has changed a lot, from when I was in school to when I was teaching high school to now. And I feel like the minutes and all of our material reflects that change. There is a greater need for critical analysis, and there is a greater appetite for materials that look at different perspectives. So we're trying to be responsive to that and provide that for both the public and for teachers who are working with our material.
And just really, it's not even just with Historica. You mentioned it's the field in general. When you look at when the first batch of minutes were made, look at the historiography from that period, and there really isn't that much disparity between the two. I mean, the more social history type stuff, which is a term I don't like, but I'll use it anyway. The more social history stuff was starting to emerge when those first minutes were coming out, and now. So the minutes themselves were reflective of the general historiography to that point. So it would be very unfair to just say of the minutes that they're not representative of Canada's history. They're really representative of the historiography at that point and what the field was doing. And so really it's not an issue that the heritage minutes are only focusing on these things. It's at the time, it's that really the whole discipline was. And now that the discipline has changed, people are studying different things, adopting new approaches, the minutes can now reflect that.
And I think that's true of our learning tools as well. In recent years, I'm sure you're familiar with work done by the Critical Thinking Consortium and Peter Satius out of UBC with the Historical Thinking Project. And those have had a dramatic impact on how history is taught in the classroom. You can see, if you look across the country, the incorporation of historical thinking skills and critical thinking focus in the curricula from province to province, territory to territory. And that's something that's reflected in our learning tools as well. If you look at materials that we created back pre-merger, both Historica Foundation and the Dominion Institute, the focus is much more on traditional history. Which is more often than not who did what when and why does it matter. And now we're trying to incorporate more of a critical analysis, which does include, perspective taking, cause and consequence, primary source analysis is increasingly a focus. And also, I think, provides students with an opportunity to loop back to the contest to form their own conclusions more. And so that's why I feel like contests like the Sir John A. one and the other contests that we create, which provide students with an opportunity to form their own conclusions and to share those with the public, are increasingly relevant in the classroom.
Definitely. And getting back to the contest, in that sense, what sort of conclusions are students coming to about Sir John A. and the early ones that you've had submitted so far, and what do you expect students to come up with?
That's a good question. I expect a wide variety of responses because I think that kids are increasingly critical of Canadian history, and there's less of that sense that they have to reproduce what their teachers or their textbooks are necessarily telling them. So I think that we'll see a greater diversity of opinions and voices and movie-making styles in the contest. That is very much my hope. When we first ran a Sir John A. contest several years ago when I first came on at Historica, the focus was much more on celebration. And the feedback that we received was that it wasn't entirely appropriate and that it would be better for students and for teachers if there was an opportunity for more analysis and more greater diversity of opinion to be shared. So I'm hoping that, they've asked for it, teachers have asked for it, students have asked for it. We've given them this opportunity, and I can't wait to see what stories they have to tell.
Because, there's definitely a lot there, from, the Charlottetown Conference to him being elected, to various meetings, to the railroad, his return in the 1890s, I would be stunned if you don't get something that talks about his proclivity for alcohol as well, because that's one of those things that sort of people latch on to when they talk about him. So there's really a lot there and a lot of material that students can look into that go beyond maybe just his politics or just the Fathers of Confederation in Charlottetown or in Quebec City. And so there's a lot that can be gained from it. So, when students are putting these things together, there's a great chance for them to be creative with a subject that is traditionally viewed, I think, as very boring, very straightforward. Here's an old white politician. And yes, he was an old white politician, but here's an opportunity to look at him in a different way and to study him and come to a conclusion that may be different from what is in your textbook.
Very much our hope. And based on the earlier videos, I think that students appreciate the opportunity to explore something that interests them about Sir John A. or Confederation, and are making videos in that vein. I do want to note that we did open the contest parameters up to include other stories of Confederation. So students are, while it's very much focused on Sir John A. and Confederation, students are also open to tell a story of one of the other fathers of Confederation in the contest. And we've had a few entries that focus on Cartier so far as a result.
And that's really good, too, because it opens up the possibilities for people across the country if they want to focus on a local individual. And the fathers of Confederation, I mean, you can argue, and I think people effectively do, that someone like Joey Smallwood, who, of course, wasn't alive during the Charlottetown, Quebec City conferences, but that he constitutes a father of Confederation. And so if you look at it really broadly, it opens up to people across the country to look at local individuals who are instrumental in Confederation and bringing the various provinces who were not part of Confederation in 1867 into the country. So when you look at it broadly like that, there's so many opportunities given those new parameters.
And also, this ties back into addressing the challenges of creating a national level contest when the provincial curricula can be so very different. We've tried to create something that has a general theme, but also there's enough wiggle room within that theme that teachers can focus on something that fits within their province's curricula or within their lesson plans or within a particular person or subtopic that they'd like to explore.
And again, it's just one of those things that can be very engaging for students. And I would very much encourage anybody listening to this, if you're not a teacher, tell your teacher friends, but also go to the website and look at some of the ones that have already been submitted. By the time we post this, there will be even more than there is now because school will be back in. People have more opportunities. So I would highly encourage it. So, Bronwyn, if people want to submit or people want to get more information about the contest, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can go to the website, just Google Stories of Sir John A. The website is front and center. It'll be the only one out there. They can also email directly if they want more information, education@historicacanada.ca, and teachers and students have until November 30th, 2015 to submit their entries.
Okay, and the parameters for the entries, obviously the heritage minutes themselves are a minute. Is that what you're looking for?
Students can create a video entry inspired by the Heritage Minute, but as I mentioned before, there's a lot of room for creativity. They don't have to stick to the traditional minutes formula. So it's loosely a Heritage Minute that focuses on a story of Sir John A., Confederation, or a father of Confederation.
And it's one of these things that I'm excited to see what the final results are. And what are the prizes for this? Just out of curiosity.
Well, we have different prizes for different. There's classroom prize, which has been kindly donated by Canada's History. We have some subscriptions. There are some books. We have some Historica Canada prize packs, and we also have some technology prizes as well, iPads or iPods. I also wanted to mention for any teachers who are listening that available on our website, we have a lot of other resources to teach about Sir John A. and Confederation, and specifically some learning tools to try and help teachers help their students select a minute and break that minute down for presentation in a video. So junior, senior, and French immersion learning tools are available on the site as well.
And that's on the Stories of Sir John A. site?
Sir John A.
Oh, yes. Terrific. And in terms of eligibility, I know it's open to everybody across the country, but are there certain grades that you're looking for submissions from?
It's open to Canadian students between grades 5 and 12, or grade 5 to Sec 5 and Secondary 5 in Quebec.
Okay, so upper, more, I shouldn't say upper level, but beyond elementary age students.
Yes, Elementary would be eligible, so grades 5 and 6. We do divide it into junior and senior so that you don't have a grade 5 class who are up against a class of grade 12s.
Okay, that's terrific. So hopefully people really latch onto it. And again, storiesofsirjohna.ca and spread the word. And if you're not a teacher, let your teacher friends know. And even for those of you who are listening who are post-secondary instructors, I've used Heritage Minutes in my class, and I think they can be a tremendous resource. So be sure to check out the site for information on those and different resources that you can use in your classes. So Bronwyn Graves, the education manager at Historica Canada, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for talking to me today, Sean.
If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, it's historyslam@gmail.com. Twitter is at Dr. Shawnee Fever, and if you're out and you see Enrico Palazzo, please say hi for me.
Thanks for listening to the History Slam podcast. Be sure to check out Active History for more features, articles, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes.